If you're visiting with us, we're very honored that you've chosen to be with us. We do care. There's some people here that have been studying the Bible for quite a number of years, and sometimes it's a little intimidating to listen to them talk and the things that they know. And I remember when I first started, I thought, I don't know if I'll ever know that much about the Bible. And I still remember the man that was my, I guess maybe mentor, not in the sense that he was trying to help me, but that I looked at his level of knowledge and wanted that very badly. And I lost track of him. I don't have the end of his story, but the point that I learned from that, or that I understand from that, is that if you apply yourself for a few years, you can come to understand exactly what God wants out of you. You can come to understand what God would have of you. Now, there's a couple of scriptures that I'd like for us to look at as we pursue through what I would like for us to have as a lesson this morning. And I'd like for you to look at the book of Romans, the 8th chapter. And if you've got a Bible, I'd appreciate if you'd turn there. Work with this scripture. It says, and we know, verse 28, and we know, we don't hope, we don't suppose, we don't wish, we know that all things work together for good to them that love God. How on earth can we know that? We can know that because we understand the providential guidance of God. I'm going to suggest to you that God has brought you together this morning to hear a message from Him. Now, if it ends up that the message isn't from Him, you need to get after me. But if the message is from Him, we know that all things work together for good. Now, God didn't say all things were good. He said that He could work all things together for good to them that love God. Now it's back to me. It can all be worked together for good if I love God. That's the providential guidance of God. God working in my life, not to see that I never shed a tear again, not to see that I always have funds for everything that I want to do, not to see that I never get sick again, not to see things that are temporary, things that are short term. All things work together to good for them that love God in an eternal reward. We noticed in Hebrews 11 that by faith they saw past their lifetime. All things work together for good to them that love God, but the good may be past this lifetime. God develops character and integrity in men and women's lives in this life to prepare them for this life. People that can see farther than this life will understand how God does that which He's doing. And to all them that are called according to His purpose. We're called with the gospel, 2 Thessalonians 2:14. And when we study enough to understand the gospel and allow the gospel to call us, that is a prerequisite to all things working together for good. Loving God is a prerequisite to all things working together for God. All things, God working in our lives. That is the definition of providential guidance. And all things work together for good to them that love God. I'm hoping we who have already been called by Him and have answered that call from Him would indelibly imprint in our minds all things work together for good. Now we can enumerate bad things that can have happened to us. God said, oh no, you made a mistake. I know that was not what you wanted at that time, but it was good for you. You learned more in that experience than you've learned from any others. I have watched you mature through that experience, and someday, whenever your faith deepens, you will be able to say, that was good for me. Today may not be the day. Tomorrow may not be the day, but someday you'll be able to say, that was good for me. I learned more from that than a lot of the good things that happened to me. That's Romans 8:28. Do we believe God's working like that in our lives? That's the only way He can say 1 Corinthians 10:13. Turn there if you don't mind. 1 Corinthians 10:13. And what he says, I'm drawing a blank. There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. Where is it?
10:13.
Huh?
You were right, 10:13.
Oh, there it is. I was looking at 16. That numerical order is hard for me. There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. What that says is that any struggle you've had, other men have already had it. But God is faithful. Oh, that's the part of that verse that needs underlined. Yell it or something. Who will not suffer you to be tempted above that which you're able. God will not suffer you to be tempted above that which you're able. How does He know my strength? How does He identify my temptations? And that's the providential guidance of God. God can say that. Why? Because He knows you. And because He knows your strength. And He will not suffer you to be tempted beyond that which you're able. But will also, watch what He says, with the temptation, make a way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. I can weather the storm. I can, when I hunt the exit door, find the exit door to the struggle that I'm in. But now see, that says you're going to have to apply yourself. You got to apply yourself to the exit door. I thought I was in a room with no doors. No, there's a door. Keep looking. And maybe it's a window. There's an exit to it. That's God working in your life. I'm going to move to a story that you're a little familiar with, maybe a lot familiar with. Starts in the book of Genesis, about the 37th chapter. Runs all the way to the end of that chapter. There was a man there named Joseph. Joseph had 11 brothers. Joseph was loved by his father, verse 3, more than all of the other brothers. That may have been a problem. That may have caused the problem. But Joseph was loved of his father. And upon that love that his father felt for him, his brothers resented him. They didn't care for Joseph. Now the point I'm wanting you to focus in on is all of the negative things that have happened to Joseph. And yet, Joseph overcomes every negative thing that happens to him. You're in a family of 12 boys, 1 girl. And your brothers don't like you. 10 of them don't like you. 1 of them does. But 10 don't like you. Pretty hard raising. He was kept at home because his father esteemed him more highly. And the 10, the baby brother stayed there too. But the 10 took the flocks out to the pasture. The father became concerned about the brothers and the flocks. And he decides to send Joseph out to his brothers to check on them and how it's going on. Now, as he goes out there, the brothers decide that they want to kill him. The 10 brothers. Think about your mindset. You got 10 brothers and they'd like to kill you. And that's what's happened. Well, another portion of his problem, and some people call Joseph a dreamer, was that he had a dream. And the dream was of the sheaves. They were in the field, and there was one that stood up straight, and the others bowed down to the one. Well, the family got the picture. Oh, Joseph, are you the one that stands up, and we're the ones that bow down? And then he had another dream. And he had a dream about the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars. Once again, the stars are bowing down. The sun, the moon, and the 11 stars are bowing down. Well, you can say, why did Joseph dream like that? Why did Joseph bother to tell his brothers of his dreams? Why not just keep it a secret, Joseph? Don't let them know. But it was the dream that came from God. It was Joseph telling, and it made his brothers hate him. Now that he's there, they make a plot to kill him. And they took him and threw him down in a cistern. Well, then they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites come by, and they thought, well, let's just sell him. And they took him back up out of the cistern because there was not uniformity on what they needed to do with him. And they sold him into a caravan that would carry him into Egypt of Ishmaelites. And the Ishmaelites sold him to Potiphar. Now, Potiphar is a military leader under Pharaoh. But Potiphar's in a pretty significant place in Egypt, and he buys Joseph. Well, Joseph reaches a place of significance in Potiphar's house. He's over everything. Now watch this. Watch it. Because Joseph's going to get in trouble again. Potiphar's wife takes an interest in Joseph. And it says she approaches him, King James, day by day. Aren't a lot of men going to withstand that? Joseph does. She finally grabs him. Joseph left his cloak and ran. Men, there's wisdom in running. It's not cowardice to run from sin. There's wisdom in running. Joseph ran. But then Potiphar's wife said that he didn't run and that he had stayed with her. And of course, Potiphar is furious. So Potiphar, now watch this, he not only was demoted, he lost his job. He not only was demoted, lost his job, but he was put in the penitentiary for it. You ever had anybody lie about you? Lie about you and create ill feelings in people that were around you that you cared about and respected? That was Joseph. But it's a little worse than that in my mind, because he was put in prison. And the text states that he was 2 years in prison. 2 years in prison. I've thought and said to my kids, if anybody ever accuses me something that's penitentiary offense, you tell them they're lying about me, because I'm not going to prison. I'm not going to do anything that's a penitentiary offense. There's some bad people there. And 2 years, I don't know how bad prison was that day, but I know those that go to prison, with the exception of Joseph. And he's there 2 years. I got a feeling that felt like 20 years. 2 years of prison, somebody lied about him when he did what God would have him do, which was right. Think about that. Wait a minute, God, where are you? Where are you? Do you see what's happened to me? I imagined my life would go correctly when I respected you and what you had to say. He said, that's your imagination. I never promised it that way. I promised if you would be faithful to death, I'd give you the crown of life, Revelation 2:10. I never promised you your life would go right. Well, Lord, I'm sorry. I had gotten possibly mixed up. Joseph's plight doesn't end there. The butler and the baker had fallen in disrespect with Pharaoh, not Potiphar, Pharaoh. And Pharaoh had put the butcher and the baker in the prison. Well, the butcher and the baker had dreams that they didn't understand. And Joseph tells them their dreams. Now watch this, because Joseph tells the baker his dream is that he's going to get hanged. Oh, well, Joseph, why didn't you leave that dream out? Why do you always honestly answer the questions that are given you? But the butler would be reinstated to working for Pharaoh. And all Joseph asked of the butler was to remember me when you're reinstated. And he forgot him. You know, all Jesus asked of me was to remember him on the first day of the week. And sometimes I forget. I can't allow things like that to be what I want for me. I can't forget when one has done for me all that's done. But I look at what he's saying, and he forgot. 2 years later, that's how long he was there, Pharaoh had a dream. Pharaoh had a dream. Pharaoh brought all the magicians and the soothsayers and everything together to tell him the interpretation of his dream, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. All of a sudden, the butler now remembers Joseph. Isn't it interesting? God reminds the butler of Joseph back in prison. The butler says to Pharaoh, there's somebody back in prison that might be able to answer you. They went, bring him out, and he forecasts 7 years of famine, 7 years of plenty. Vice versa, plenty then famine. And when he does that, Pharaoh says, whoa, this is a special fellow. We need to put you over this. You need to take care of us. And he did. He said, okay, now watch it. He came out of prison, and now he's the number 2 man in Egypt. Number 2 man in Egypt. God working in his life. Number 2 man in Egypt. And what does he do? In the 7 years of plenty, he puts up and puts up and puts up. All written ready for the 7 years of famine. Sure enough, now the 7 years of famine have come, and he warns the people, but they don't adequately prepare for the famine because they don't trust Joseph's talk. All right, now we're there. What is Joseph? Honest, integrity, character, and truthful. What does he do? He puts up all of the money that's paid for the food for Pharaoh. And he then begins to buy the land from the people wanting food for Pharaoh, not for Joseph, for Pharaoh. To the point now the people have nothing. They were going to die anyway, and they're now basically sharecropping for Pharaoh. But the drought's bigger than just Egypt. And so what happens now? Well, Israel, Jacob, sends his 10 boys, he thinks one's dead, sends his 10 boys to Egypt to buy food. The 10 boys buy food. But Joseph knows that those are his brothers. They don't recognize him because they thought they killed him. And so he knows those are his brothers. I was impressed with that story. 3 times I checked it, this time reading through. Joseph walked off into another room to cry. Everything go right in Joseph's life? Everything didn't go right in Joseph's life. He cried. The brothers that were trying to kill him. But what he did was, he told them he wanted them, if they ever were to come back, to bring the brother they didn't bring. Because Joseph and Benjamin shared the same mother. Well, they went back and the father said, no, I'm not sending Benjamin. I've already lost his brother who I love most. He's dead. I'm not sending Benjamin. And then he sends them back. And Joseph says, no, you've got to bring him. And they didn't know what to do. They brought him. They told the father, I'll stand in his stead. And they brought him. So things were given to them because of that. But then a cup of Joseph was put in Benjamin's sack. And they caught them. And they said, because they knew none of them would do that, we will kill the one that stole your cup. When they searched the sacks, it was found in Benjamin's sack. Now the older brother says, no, we can't honor that. We can't do that. And he said, go back and get your father and bring them to Egypt as he revealed himself to them who he was, and I will see that all of you are taken care of. They went back to Canaan, got the father. Of course, the father was thrilled to find Joseph alive. And they moved to Egypt and lived there hundreds of years. And then they were to go back home. That's the book of Exodus. We've read 37 through 50 of Genesis. Then they were to go back home. That's the book of Exodus. But you know what I look there? What I learn about Joseph that I want us to think about? Think with me, please. But a few points off of the life of Joseph. Joseph did the right thing. Invariably, he was going to do what was right. Even when he had to tell the baker he was going to be hanged, even when he felt the need to tell his brother of the dreams that said they would bow down to him, and what did they do? They bowed down to him as second in command in Egypt. Exactly correct. Joseph did the right thing. I think that preaches to you and me. Sometimes the right thing is a hard thing. A hard thing. But it will work for good. 2 Corinthians 8:21 says, proving for things honest among all men. Proving for things honest among all men. You know, generally we know what's right. Somehow we excuse ourselves to do it wrong. And Joseph did the right thing. Another thing that I noticed about Joseph is Joseph was not reactionary. Now that says to me, I'm going to do this because of what you just did to me. I'm going to do this because of the way you're acting toward me. Joseph knew what right was, and he did what right was, immaterial of the way you treated him. He did what was right. Sometimes we react to people. We let them dictate the relationship. We don't have to react to people. We act toward people. God teaches us how to act. And we act toward people. We don't react to people. We act toward people. I like that about Joseph. He was not reactionary. Third thing I notice about Joseph, and I think this is so important, he never got bitter. You know, I think that's what happened to Judas. I think Judas got bitter somewhere in the point of being one of the 12 apostles. Judas got bitter. He couldn't be a part as an equal group, and so his bitterness forced him to become unique to the others of the 11, and the uniqueness was a negative uniqueness. I think it's so crucial for you and I to look inside ourselves, examine yourselves, whether you be in the faith, prove your own self. Know you're not your own self, that Christ Jesus be in you, except you be a reprobate, 2 Corinthians 13:5. And look if we're justifying poor conduct because of a bitterness. We were hurt over here and we're mad about that. Joseph was hurt so many times that I don't even know if he would be able to enumerate them. Well, my brothers hate me, and that's why I act like this. Well, I was put in prison for not doing anything wrong, and that's why I act like this. Well, and he could have gone on and on with his bitternesses, but he didn't. He cleaned out the bitters that he might remain sweet. I read a story once of a fellow that threw down a rose and stomped on it. And he asked the audience, a school teacher fellow, what do you notice when I stomp on the rose? One little boy said, it smells good in here. Would to God we could be the rose when stepped on we smell better instead of worse. And that's exactly what took place. He didn't get bitter. He didn't get vindictive. Sometimes we're going to get even. He didn't get vindictive. Romans 12:19-21 says, dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him something to drink. Don't get into vindictive. Don't try to get even. The whole end of the book of Genesis would change if Joseph had worked to get even. When he came to power in Egypt, he had the ability to get his brothers back. Instead, when he sees his brothers, love comes forth and he weeps. I look further. Joseph never got envious. He wanted to improve himself, but not out of envy. He tried to make good out of everything and every place that God placed him. Please think with me. God placed you in those positions because He's got something for you to do there. If you don't pay attention, you'll never see it. But He's got something for you to do there. When I think of envy, I can't help but think of Saul, the Old Testament Saul. That Saul was esteemed highly. Saul was a better looking man. I think you can find that in the text, than was David. But when the people began to respect David more than him, Saul was burning with envy about David. I see another story. The prodigal son, Luke 15. The older brother burned with envy when the father killed the fatted calf because the younger brother came home. What is envy? Envy immobilizes people. It's not that which we want. And what it did in the older brother's case is it created self-pity. He thought it pitiful that he'd been a good boy all the time and he'd done this. He wasn't pleased that his younger brother had come home. He found it pitiful that he'd had no calf killed for him. You've always done good and right and been the good brother. There'd be no reason to kill a fatted calf for you, older brother. The little younger brother wasted his living on riotous stuff. He's the one that we're glad has changed and come home. No envy inside of that. Why did all of this happen to work out like that for Saul? And I don't know totally every answer. But I know one that I think stands out, and that is that Joseph was dependent upon God. All the way through, he depended upon God. 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast your cares upon the Lord, for He cares for you. God is wanting to providentially work in your life. He's wanting that you depend on Him, that you back up and clean up. Clean up all of the attitudes that don't need to be a part of you. Preacher, that's not easy. God didn't say it was easy. He said you could do it. God didn't say you'd do it in a day. It may take 20 years, but you can do it. God said you can do it. And I can get out of me all of the things that contaminate me, that I might begin to look for the positive where God lives through me and in me. And that's what He said through Joseph. He spoke to us of His providential guidance. I got a good friend that when I met him, he was so filled with hatred that he was not even decent company. Why filled with hatred? He was a part of 4 kids. His mother was killed in a head-on collision. 2 drunks hit his mother. That meant, as each one of them said the other one was driving, neither one of them went to jail because there were only 3 people there and one's dead, and the other 2 says the other one's driving. They went free. He was bitter. He was filled with hate because now a father, we're not quite as good as you are, ladies, with children, has 4 kids trying to raise. 3 of them still at home. 3 of them still at home. He had trouble getting past that until Jesus and things that were good began to change and begin to grow. We're begging you. All things work together for good to them that love God, to them that are called according to His purpose. He calls through the gospel. He's calling to be the Lord of your life. And you will answer based on your love for Him. And then you and He will work together for the rest of your life. That's Romans 8:28. Because you are going to work to clean out the old and the bad and to replace it with the positive and the good. To let your life be used by Him. That's Bible. From the beginning to the end, that's Bible. If we can assist you in that in any way, we'd love to as together we stand and sing.
Have you been to Jesus for the cleansing power? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb?